Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan serves as the Minister for Information Technology and Digital Services. Earlier, he served as the Minister for Finance and Human Resources Management in the government of Tamil Nadu, India. He is the MLA from the Madurai Central Constituency in the 15th and 16th, that is 21 to 26 Legislative Assemblies of Tamil Nadu. Earlier in 2016, he was elected as an MLA on a DMK ticket on his maiden attempt. He served on the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly's Public Accounts Committee 16 to 20, and he was an executive committee member of the Tamil Nadu chapter of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. In June 2017, he was appointed as the founding secretary of the newly formed IT wing of the DMK. In that capacity, he has undertaken to build up the party's technology platforms and a cadre of several thousand office bearers across the state. Dr. Rajan previously worked as an international investment banker for many years in several trading, market sales, and management roles at Lehman Brothers, largely in New York, and Standard Chartered Bank, mostly based in Singapore, where he last served as Senior Managing Director, Financial Markets, overseeing the sales of several fixed income products globally. Dr. Rajan earned a BTech Honours in Chemical Engineering from NIT Trichy, MS Operations Research and PhD, Human Factors Engineering and Engineering Psychology from the State University of New York, and an MBA Finance from the MIT Sloan School of Management. Dr. Rajan represents the fourth generation of his family's engagement in the Dravidian movement, and he is a third generation elected representative, following in the footsteps of his grandfather, Palanivel Sir P.T. Rajan, former Minister and Chief Minister of the Madras Presidency under Dayaki, and his father, P.T.R. Palanivel Rajan, former Speaker of the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly and Minister of the Government of Tamil Nadu. His ancestor, M.T. Subramania Mudaliar, served as Vice President of the South Indian Liberal Federation, the fountainhead of the Dravidian movement at its inception in 1916. With his wonderful hierarchy and a wonderful family tree, no better man to address us on intellectual wellness. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Dr. Palanivel Thiaga Rajan.
Colonel David, Mrs. Renu, my many friends I see here, Mike, Oscar, Puni, Josh, General Brad, so many people that I'm privileged to know and work with in some capacity. And of course, brilliant journalist and today a thought leader, Faye D'Souza, who I know from before as well, and earlier Barka Dutt. I'm a bit intimidated to be here, actually. Normally I can speak about anything, anytime. But today, after listening to the earlier two sessions, I'm a bit overwhelmed. I think there's been so much truth and so much clarity that I'm not sure that I'm going to live up to the task. But anyway, I must first start by saying that almost anything Colonel David would ask me to do, I'd do. Because whenever I've needed any help for anything from a CSR perspective or any good cause, he's always the first to step up. So first I have to say thank you, from feeding school children to many things, whenever I've asked for some help for the public interest. He has always been there. And so, whatever he had asked me to speak on, I would have come here today to speak. But by looking at me, you can tell that A, I shouldn't be the guy speaking about physical wellness. I'm not that fit. And B, that maybe I should learn to say podum more often at events. But I think in some sense, maybe if there's anything I'm qualified to talk about, it's intellectual wellness. And through the very gracious and kind introduction that the Colonel gave me, you'll notice that I spent a lot of time in school, a lot of time in college. And I got 4 degrees, and every time I changed my major. So, I had this natural curiosity that I wanted to learn something different every time I decided to go to the next level of education. Now, I tried to first get a definition. What is intellectual wellness? And I'll give you the 2 that I found, based on which I tried to put my thoughts together. One of them was from the website for this conference, and it said it's about continuous learning, about critical thinking, about stimulating activities which would increase your knowledge, your creativity, your mental growth, and through all of these things to enhance your cognitive abilities and thereby your quality of life. It's a good description. I also went and checked out a couple of other university websites, and they talk about it almost the same way. They say it's about acquiring new skills and knowledge, about stimulating creative activities, and about curiosity. So I thought, again, based on my experiences in life, I talk about maybe half a dozen aspects of intellectual wellness that would fit into this description. And from my own experiences and progress, see if maybe they could bring some practical examples to these very clear concepts. To me, I think the beginning of intellectual wellness really is curiosity. Anybody who wants to know why, who wants to know how, is likely to be somebody whose brain is functioning all the time. In fact, the next level is people who want to know why not. Not just why this way, why not some other way. In a sense, all of life is that journey from, babies that can barely focus their eyes to presumably wise people who pass away. We're in this path of acquisition, sometimes knowledge for knowledge's sake, but mostly this understanding of ourselves, our communities, our families, our societies, our world, and how they all fit together, what is correlated to what drives what instigates what, and hopefully apply that knowledge as we go through life, either for commercial gain, for personal progress, for better relations, for greater harmony, for public service, whatever the proximate driver may be. But something I've learned in my life, a close second to curiosity, is this notion of empathy. I remember my interview when I first went to Wall Street, and I was fortunate enough, I had really good grades when I got out of MIT. I had many offers to interview, many possibilities. And I happened to go to Lehman Brothers after I already had like 6 offers in my hand. And the gentleman who interviewed me was also an MIT alum and had come from very different circumstances than I. He had come from a very middle-class British background, had really gone to study against his father's instincts. He had been a metal worker in the Industrial Revolution towns of the northern England. And so this gentleman, when he was interviewing me, later became a very good friend of mine, was one of the most successful and most richly paid traders in the business that I was in, which is the fixed income bond trading business and derivative trading business. And he asked me, what is the most important attribute or quality of a trader? Now I'm talking about a trader on Wall Street who's sitting in front of 20 screens and, under the laws of New York, when the phone rings and somebody says, what's the price on, 500 million GE bonds, you make a price, he says, done, that is a enforceable contract. That's the kind of pressure and the kind of timing that you have to work in on a trading desk at Wall Street. He said, what is the most important attribute for a trader? And it took me maybe like 20 seconds because I had to think through. I had never bought or sold a single security in my life at that point. So I thought about it and I said, empathy. And he said, you're absolutely right. I think that was one of the main reasons I eventually got the job. Because what he was trying to say, what I am trying to say, is that if every time you interact with somebody, you put yourself in the shoes of the person on the other side, and you say, what is it that is driving their motivation? What is it that is driving their reason to pick up the phone? Why are they going to sell? Why do they want to buy? Then you are in a much better position to transact. And so actually he was a brilliant trader, but he started at this core. It is all about the person and the motivation and the logic and the desire. Where does that come from? And I think the more you can think like that, the more you are going to be capable of lateral thinking, the more you're capable of thinking out of the box, the more your creative solutions and possibilities appear. And you don't just get into your own rut that you go down one path, because most of us have a tendency, the way we learn, we start developing a personality, we start developing an approach, and we get very fixated in that. And it really requires us to step away from ourselves and look at things from other eyes to continue to have that kind of learning. In some sense, I'm always saying that I'm a lifelong student. If any of you have heard my speeches anyway, I keep saying I'm a lifelong student. I practice that every day. Any day when I have not learned something new that day is not a good day for me. It could be a little thing, it could be a big thing, it could be a profound thing. But I must finish the day more aware, more knowledgeable, more conscious of something than I started the day. When things go well, I try to analyze why did they go well. When things go badly, a lot of things go badly in public life, in politics. Say, why did they go badly? Most people win an election, they're happy. I start the analysis after the election result comes out. I want to know, why did this result come? What was the difference from last time? And it is amazing how much insight you can get and how much more aware you can be if you do this kind of post-hoc analysis. But I don't want to be all about just personality issues. Let's look at some other ways I think can help with intellectual wellness. I think we are very fortunate to live in an age where we get a whole deluge of information at the tap of a finger or the tap of a button. There's some downsides to it, I'll come back to it in a minute, but it is unimaginable. When I was on my way to graduate school in the United States, I didn't know which university had what kind of ranking, I didn't know which town had what kind of weather, there was no email, and it cost something like $4 a minute or something to make a phone call between the US and India. And so I went blind. There was a huge information inefficiency in the market. I could have gone to a lot different school had I known which school was good at what and had I known what ranking I would be in the spectrum of applicants. The good news is the internet has provided us not just unlimited or infinite information, it's also made a lot of these markets, for lack of a better word, very efficient, right? From used car sales to university selections, almost everybody has universal access to adequate information to make better decisions. and you don't have to feel like you're being, blindsided or hooded in your approach to some transaction or some decision. The social networks bring another dimension yet to this notion of intellectual wellness, because the ability to connect with people across time, across colleagues from college 30 years ago, 50 years ago, you haven't seen, suddenly one day you get a WhatsApp or a Facebook Messenger or something. And so I think the ability to keep these networks is a very good thing, because it reminds us that we used to be somebody different one day, at least some parts of us. Now there's this notion of life that says that constancy, that steady values is the indication of character, is the indication of a good person. But at the end of it, the truth is that we're changing all the time. There's the old Stoic philosopher, I think it was Heraclitus, who said that no man steps in the same river twice, because it is not the same river and he is not the same man. All of us are changing all the time. And in this context of change, the ability to benchmark or have some bookmark of who you used to be compared to who you are now, I think is always a healthy thing. I would say that engaging in sports and games, partly for skill, partly for chance. I go to play golf, I play tennis without knowing it. I'm always calculating some odds somewhere, trying to figure out the physics of something, trying to figure out the possibility of something. I used to play bridge. I recently had a bridge tournament held in Madurai that I was a chief guest, and I was suddenly struck by how so many people who play bridge continue to be so mentally, with full acuity till their late 80s, 90s. They're able to apply this kind of reasoning and calculation and finding out which card is where and all that. And it's a great deterrent to the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's and all these other things. I think even the motor skills and the hand-eye coordination that comes from playing sports enhances intellectual wellness as best I can tell. I think hobbies, cultural activities, community activities, anything that makes you do something different from your day job, that makes you interact with more people, that makes you look at things from a different perspective, will have some value in my opinion. For me personally, every single time I travel, even though these days most of the time I travel to the same places, when I was a banker I used to travel to about 20 countries a year, and many of them 3 or 4 times a year. And every time I traveled, it gave me a new perspective. It stimulated some new thinking. Why is this culture like this? Why is this environment like that? How come the infrastructure is different here? Why are these societal rules in this country so different from my country? Why does this language have only this many words for a particular object and mine has 6? So, or a particular emotion. I think music, cuisine, culture, nature, all of these, when I travel, have always been a great stimulant to me. Now, I don't want to talk about intellectual wellness without touching on 2 things. Right? At some level, you have to be physically well to have the luxury of pursuing intellectual wellness. It's not an isolated notion. You also have to be, in my opinion, mentally somewhat well. The Colonel picked up on it. I think General Brar picked up on it. Faye picked up on it. At some level, you have to have equanimity. You have to have a sense of gratitude. You have to have a sense of community. You must have other human relationships that give you a sense of well-being in the ecosystem, in the human network that you exist. And I think those are all building blocks to intellectual wellness. I think also that the negative aspects of the internet and social media should be not downplayed, especially those aspects that drive people to keeping up with the Joneses or trying to live life on somebody else's terms. And these negatives, I think, we need help as a society. Parents need to make sure that children don't get involved with these kinds of tools or these kinds of applications very soon, very quickly. In my house, my children are 16 and 18. None of them has a social media account, and I'm not that atypical. If you look at most of the executives in Silicon Valley, in fact, I'm sure you've seen the documentary on Netflix. It was called The Social Dilemma or something like that, where all these guys who created all these apps, who ran all of these, said, when they were asked, what about your house? They said, my house, heavens no. My children will never be allowed to touch this stuff, right? So I think those negatives we have to think about as well. I will just say two things. I think in politics, it's a very relatively rare commodity, but intellectual wellness, I think, is of huge value. If I have gone to the level that I have, whatever that is, in relatively little time, 5 years as an opposition MLA and 2 years as a minister, it must be because I speak about ideas, I speak about information. I convey something that adds some value to people. And I am thinking all the time, and I'm able to extract some notion, some understanding, some insight, and translate that. And what has always been an inspiration to me is this statement from Peraringa Ranna, whose birthday it was yesterday, which we celebrated in style with the Chief Minister's 1,000 rupee scheme. He was asked the question, you are known to speak on several topics in the same evening. How do you prepare yourself to do so? And his answer was, a good speaker or writer need not prepare his speech in advance. A paragraph in an article is enough to speak at length about its content for an hour or so. There are plenty of things to share with the people. As I speak, many new ideas or suggestions get into my mind, which I promptly convey. That, I think, is the epitome of an inspiring speaker, an intellect, and in this case, a social reformer, which he was, the founder of our party. There are many ways of measuring intellect. There are many dimensions. In my PhD studies, I had to do a lot of work in cognitive psychology because I was an engineering student who had done like applied math. And so I had to start from foundational courses before I could finish my research. And there was at least two schools of thought. The more British European school, that there is such a thing as general intelligence, and that by their definition was correlated to race and the evolution of how long your culture had existed, and therefore that European male should be on average far more intelligent than, let's say, tribal people who had not been exposed, etc. That's one school of thought in psychology, in cognitive psychology. The other, which is very American and very correlated to their philosophy of life, is that there are multiple dimensions of intelligence. Maybe there's some correlation between them, but clearly the ability to speak well is very different from the ability to do complex math, is very different from the ability to compose an opera, is very different from being able to create a beautiful painting. So there's got to be talent and intellect and measurable skill on more than one dimension, and there must be there could possibly be some correlation, but there must be enough distinction that people can excel in different things without this notion of a general intelligence that is then derived only hereditary genetics, evolution of the culture, etc. Be that as it may, I think by now the data is very clear that the latter school of thought is probably much more realistic. But even the latter school of thought, somebody as radical in his thinking as Noam Chomsky and many others have posited that language and linguistic execution is probably, for most human beings, the height of intellectual activity. And in some sense, great writers are remembered for centuries, for millennia. Big businessmen and political leaders get forgotten, and writers remain. The notion of language as the translating medium through time, I think, is reasonably well established. In my own experience, and a very personal one, I think the ability to laugh, the ability to use language in a humorous way about oneself, about one's family, about one's friends, and in a collective evening, the ability to all laugh together, to me, is a great contributor and an indication of intellectual wellness. The happiest times I have, no matter that I'm minister, not minister, MLA, not MLA, banker, not banker, my wife, my sons and I sit at a table together, which is a rarity, happens maybe once in 10 days. We sit for an hour, we'll be laughing so hard we'll almost fall off our chairs. And most of the jokes will be about ourselves and all the weaknesses and differences between us. To me, that is about the happiest time I have in my life, and about the time that I think that my brain is functioning at its peak capacity. I think I have about 2.5 minutes left, but I won't bore you with any unnecessary extraneous comments. Let me just conclude by saying that it's very rare to find a company that invests this kind of effort and time in the notion of wellness, the different dimensions of wellness, holds a conference on it, or gathers so many people and addresses every aspect of it with exactly the right people, barring the exception of me. And so I want to congratulate everybody on the team, starting with the Colonel and his wife, and all of you who are here. I hope that you have got the profound benefit of having attended such a seminar or conference, certainly the first I've been to, and every person I heard, I learned something new. When I heard General Bras speak, the value of this notion of gratitude and the greater good, which has been evident in the Harvard grant studies and most of the longitudinal studies of what actually makes people successful and happy, resonated with me. When I heard Faye speak, the notion of carve your own path, know your own ambition, set your own limits, and don't dance to other people's tunes, resonated with me. Of course, it was deeply inspiring to listen to the two generals talk about their experiences, and in the same sense that there is brutality and destruction, there is also greater notions of team spirit, of protecting each other, of loyalty, of service, of the greater good. So it has been a very pleasant and enlightening afternoon for me. I thank you again, Colonel, for inviting me, for everybody here, and I wish you all the rest of the day to be as beneficial as it was to me. Thank you.
I now request Colonel David and Dr. Renuka to please join me on stage to do the honors and present a memento to our distinguished guest.